Hello, today I will be talking to you about the different methods for acquiring research data. One of them is secondary data analysis, because sometimes it is very expensive and time consuming to collect the regional data. So many research questions can be examined using the data already existing. And basically what secondary data analysis is the analysis of data that were collected and stored for some other purpose. And human service organizations store great amounts of information about their clients and programs. And there are also many other sources of research data within the public domain. For example, again, one of them is human service organizations. Other ones are public social agencies, smaller private and sectarian organizations, computerized databases and information systems, census data, public documents through the internet, government agencies and foundations, and other professional organizations such as the NASW and CSWE. For example, when I did my dissertation, I used secondary data to do my dissertation, so I didn't collect my own data. I used an existing data that was collected by other researchers from the University of California. So you can use secondary data either to do descriptive and sometimes explanatory research, but usually not in experiments since variables are not controlled. Some of the advantages are that the financial costs are minimal compared to other data collection methods, and generally it requires less time than other forms of data collection and analysis. It is less intrusive than methods that collect data directly from research participants. And some of the limitations is that the already existing data or secondary data may fall short of providing all of the information required to answer the research question or to provide support or non-support for a research hypothesis. And another problem may be that the quality of the measurement methods used to gather the data may not be strong, and there's nothing that you can do to influence that. So again, I mentioned that when I did my dissertation, I had to adapt my research question and hypotheses to the data that I already had. So now you need to go backwards instead of answering your question or proposing your question first. You may need to look through the data to see what kind of question or what kind of hypothesis can be explored or answered through the already existing data. Another type of data collection is called oral histories, and these are written accounts or audios or video recordings of people discussing an experience or life event from their own perspective. And the recordings are analyzed using a variety of research methods, such as content analysis, in order to answer the research question. So when using oral histories as a data source, should be remember that an oral history describes most accurately how someone perceive or experience something, not necessarily what actually happened. Another way to collect data is through using client logs and qualitative research. And this may involve journals that clients keep regarding a problem and the meaning that they ascribe to the problem, descriptions of certain events, thoughts regarding relationships, emotions, and mental health issues. And in quantitative research, this can be, for example, giving your clients the ability to record behaviors, thoughts, and emotions on a continual basis. and it may count these activities. They also can record the length. So for example, how often are you drinking? How often are you doing certain activities? So that can be used in quantitative. Another way is doing a systematic observation. Observation, for example, of some behavior or phenomenon in a planned way. Systematic observations can be structured or non-structured, and they can be used in both qualitative and quantitative research. And observations can be made in a contrived or created setting, or maybe made in a natural setting. Another way of collecting data is through surveys, and most surveys are cross-sectional, meaning that they're done in one point in time, and they can be used to collect both quantitative and more subjective data, more descriptive data, and surveys rely on carefully constructed data collection instruments. And it is important to remember that one should create effective survey questions if you're doing a survey as a form of data collection. Distortion is likely to happen when any self-administered data collection instrument is used, so we need to keep that in mind. And especially when data is collected by mail, because we also do not know whether or not participants understood what was asked or if they responded honestly. And if inaccurate data are obtained because of poorly worded questions or statements, we cannot always detect it. Questions that we need to avoid include leading questions, prestige bias, vagueness, double barrel questions, questions impossible to answer, jargon, acronyms, and emotional language. Another disadvantage of surveys is that, especially if you mail in the surveys, it is impossible to know the identity of the participant. In addition, if you also ask or mail the surveys to participants, you're likely to have a low rate of return. And some suggestions for higher response rates include sending out multiple times, keeping it short, avoiding bad times, providing incentives, providing postage paid, or pre-addressed return envelopes, using a carefully worded cover letter, using a return address and letterheads, and using organization agency address when beneficial. And of course, another way is in-person interviews to collect data that can only be gathered through oral communication or a combination of oral communications and first-person observation. And quantitative research, in-person interviews are sometimes used to verify data gathered using some other data collection methods, such as mailed surveys. In qualitative research, interviewing is often the primary or even the only method of data collection. And it provides the opportunity to probe, asking follow-up questions when needed. And these are likely to have high completion rates, and access to supplementary data, such as being able to observe nonverbal behaviors, is also an advantage. And you have the opportunity to individualize the data collection. Another way is doing group interviews or focus groups. So a common form of in-person group data collection is called focus groups, and you use these to gain insights from the client, staff, and others who have formed opinions about certain experiences, problems, or social programs. And focus groups are more likely to be used in qualitative studies than quantitative ones. And it is believed that a focus group has certain advantages over one-on-one interviews Particularly if the experience is one that is difficult to talk about, the group can be a source of emotional support. Other forms of group data collection methods include doing social groups, committee meetings, treatment groups, and use group settings for other methods such as surveys. Telephone interviews. So if the amount of data needed is small and it's not too personal, and if the research participants have some connection or positive association with the researcher or the organization he or she represents, telephone interviews can be an economical way to collect data from a large number of participants. A serious limitation of data gathered through telephone interviews is the difficulty of obtaining a sample of participants who are representative of the group being studied. Another way is electronic communication. But some issues that you may experience is in response bias, and it may be difficult to obtain representativeness. So the necessary conditions for this type of data collection include completing a list of research of participants. And the majority of participants need to know how to use electronic communication. And you need to ensure that variables and difference of online use is irrelevant to some other variables. And also, these would be more like data that you would collect through a questionnaire format, which would likely be more quantitative research data.